King of the Hill may be one of the most grounded animated sitcoms ever made. Under its Texas drawl and propane pride, it is a quiet, emotional intelligence that often goes unspoken, but never unfelt. Today, we're diving into how Season 3 of King of the Hill masterfully portrays grief. Through Hank, Luann, Bill, and even some other important characters like Peggy and Con, we see a small town's subtle, funny, and often heartbreaking dance with loss and grief's impact on their life. And to do this, we're focusing on 3 key episodes. 1. Death of a propane salesman, where Hank has a near-death experience and how fear can make him behave in irrational ways. 2. Wings of the Dope, a surreal and touching look at Luann's coping with the ghost of her ex-boyfriend. And finally, Pretty Pretty Dresses, a Christmas episode that reveals Bill's slow decline into grief and madness. With all of that out of the way, let's head to Arlen, Texas.
Y'all ever think about death?
Now, for Hank Hill, grief isn't expressed through tears, it's through propane and his routines. When the megalomart explodes in Death of a Propane Salesman, Season 3, Episode 1, Hank is visibly disturbed, not because Buckley had just died or because he nearly lost his own life, but because his career, his routine, and his very propane-fueled purpose is destabilized. After the previous episode, where megalomart starts selling propane, effectively putting Strickland Propane out of business, Hank has to find a new job, one in the new department of the very thing that put his love and livelihood out of business. Realizing now that he's being bossed around by kids whose whole life is the equivalent of Hank's experience in the field, he and the other previous business owners, now working at megalomart, decide that they are going to fight back to gain respect. Well, due to inexperience by people in the field not understanding that propane is, in fact, a flammable gas, suddenly, megalomart goes out in a huge explosion, which is something that, here on out, is implied by other characters that it was all Hank's doing. Perhaps because he was disgruntled. However, that is not the only thing shaken up here. The very thing that Hank has placed his identity around, propane, is now the thing that scares him the most. The fear that the next time propane is going to ignite, he will surely be caught in the crossfire. His irrational fear is completely understandable, going as far as to become avoidant from working with propane, grilling, and even too scared to reignite the water heater. It's here that we see that his grief has manifested into post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. PTSD will cause someone to act irrationally about certain things, even going as far as avoiding certain things altogether. A personal example of this is when my younger sister passed away several years ago in her sleep in the same room as me, and it terrified me. I couldn't sleep for years because I was also worried that I was going to do the same. The first year was arguably the worst, staying up as long as I could before my body physically gave out on me, forcing me to sleep, and then waking up terrified that if I didn't wake up right in that moment, I too could suffer that same fate. Even now, several years later, I still ask my roomie to come in and check on me throughout the night, making sure that I'm still alive. Fun fact, a year after that incident, I was officially diagnosed with PTSD. This episode reminds me of that irrational fear you get when you go through a traumatic, life-changing event. Little things that you never thought about, such as sleeping, can seem like the end of the world, like you're going to die. It changes your routines and can even alter things that you never even thought about before. Here, his PTSD makes him avoid propane. You see a man stripped of identity. We also see Hank process grief through avoidance in Wings of the Dope, Season 3, Episode 23. He doesn't understand Luann's vision of Buckley's ghost. And more importantly, he doesn't want to. Grief for Hank is too messy, too spiritual, and too much for someone who once said emotions are for women and the weak. And yet, his empathy grows, quietly and gently.
It's not fair! How often in real life are you tested?
And now, Luann's journey through grief is a lot more explicit and more supernatural. In Death of a Propane Salesman, Buckley's sudden death causes Luann's entire world to fall apart. The funny thing is, Buckley was never a good boyfriend, but to Luann, he was her boyfriend. One of the few anchors she had left after her mother went to jail and her father disappeared. Now, fast forward to Wings of the Dope, Season 3, Episode 23, and Luann sees this ghost bouncing on a trampoline. On the surface, it's a silly gag, but emotionally, it's a young woman creating meaning out of trauma. Her belief that Buckley is an angel gives her comfort, even when no one else seems to understand. This experience actually changes Luann's life. She then sees Buckley again in the car as he tells her that she should just give up and that Jesus has bigger plans for her. And just as she's about to hit an oncoming vehicle, she swerves, landing in a ditch. From there, she meets some students in the local community college, thinking that she goes there as well. Then, something inside of her clicks. Now realizing what she believes Buckley was talking about, She goes from being a failing beauty school student to enrolling into Arlen Community College. It changes her future. And by the end of the episode, the final time we see Buckley, she lets him go. Not in a dramatic, tearful goodbye, but a quiet acceptance. Her grief arc isn't about romance, it's about agency. Luann learns that she doesn't need Buckley or his ghost to move forward.
You don't deserve William Fontaine de la Trave!
And then there's Bill. Pretty Pretty Dresses, Season 3, Episode 9 might be one of the darkest Christmas episodes in animated TV history. On the surface, it's seen as almost comical when Bill dresses up as his ex-wife during the holidays. But this is grief in its rawest form, delusion, regression, and untreated depression. During the episode, we see that Bill is finding a way to cope by getting an iguana and naming it after his ex-wife, Lenore, who had cheated on him and left him several years ago. And Bill is going through it, becoming so depressed that he starts trying to take his own life. And because of this, his friends go full suicide watch for him, Hank even taking a few days off work just to make sure that one of his best friends since childhood doesn't do anything he can't take back. Eventually, this all culminates to a moment where Hank is fed up. He doesn't understand why Bill is so upset about something that happened years ago and why he's still choosing to live in grief. So, in his own way of trying to help Bill, Hank goes in and starts tearing everything up inside of Bill's house. He's ruining all the Christmas decorations and even tearing apart the gifts that Bill had bought and wrapped for his ex-wife. Suddenly, Bill goes silent. He's in an almost hypnotic-like state, as the way he's been coping has been completely destroyed right before his very eyes. Something snaps within Bill. As Hank goes to return the lizard that escaped Bill during the dinner party the night before, he sees that someone is in the backyard, someone he doesn't recognize. As he goes to tell the person off, the person turns around and it's revealed that it was actually Bill. He's dressed up in his ex-wife's dress, hanging laundry to dry. This understandably concerns Hank, as well as everyone else. Bill wearing his delusions and pretending to be his ex-wife now wherever he goes. It all ends up at Hank's Christmas party, where Bill shows up pretending to be his ex-wife. This understandably makes everyone else at the party uncomfortable. As Bill starts to freak out, Hank comes up with the idea to put on one of Peggy's dresses to show his friend some kind of support, realizing that Bill has to heal in his own way. Unfortunately for him, Bill takes it as Hank making fun of him and how he chooses to cope. Obviously, we know that this isn't the case, but to Bill, he sees this as not even one of his best friends supporting him. And here, we see that Hank finally talks some sense into him, pretending to be Lenore and telling Bill that she no longer loves him. Bill fights back at first, trying to say that she still does, but eventually, Hank gets it through Bill's head. What makes this episode so powerful is how it walks a tightrope. It's absurd and funny until it's not. Bill is a tragic character because the show never gives him a fix. Just small amounts of friendship, like Hank and the guys watching over him on Christmas Eve, preventing him from taking his own life. A little side note here, I actually want to analyze the thought process of Bill wearing his ex-wife's clothes. This happens after Hank destroys Bill's way of coping by being hopeful and sure that she'll come back. We can actually see that Bill is empty now, this trauma causing him to completely lose feeling within himself and now has no idea how to be his normal self again. And I assume that he realized that the last time he felt something was when he was thinking about his ex-wife, and that's when he decides to just become the thing that helps him, to become his own solution. He feels something again when he could pretend that his ex-wife still loves him and that he can try to convince everyone else of the same thing, it clearly not working. And I feel like that's why he seems so full of life when he could pretend he's Lenore, when he could pretend that he's still married to her. I believe that is why he was so convinced to pretend to be her. Feel free to tell me what you think down below. I could be completely wrong, but this is what I got from context clues. Anyways.
I cry river of tear for Buckley. Why not you?
And they aren't the only examples. Other characters in the show have their own ways of dealing with grief. In fact, we find out that Peggy actually started a scrapbook full of newspaper clippings of gruesome highway accidents as her way of dealing and coping with death. And Con, too, surprisingly, was also affected by Buckley's untimely death. We find out that Con and Buckley were actually close, revealing that they got close because Con loved the fact that Buckley seemed to piss Hank off. Interesting detail here. During Buckley's funeral, Con goes up to talk during the eulogy. He talks about an old Buddhist story. The moment gets a confused reaction, Hank even muttering to Dale about the fact that he thinks Khan was actually just telling a joke. But the meaning behind this story is surprisingly deep, and in the context of King of the Hill, it's actually one of the most philosophical lines in the series. Now, let me break down how I see it. This story is a real Zen Buddhist parable meant to convey the essence of mindfulness in the face of death. The man in the story is surrounded by mortal danger, tigers above and below, symbolic of symbolic of inevitable death no matter what direction he turns. But instead of panicking, he notices the present moment. He sees a strawberry, something beautiful, small, and simple, and chooses to enjoy it. Even knowing that death is certain, he doesn't escape, he doesn't fight, he just fully experiences one final joy. And in Buddhist thought, this is about acceptance, presence, and non-attachment. You can't always change your fate. You can choose how to meet it. So what is Khan, a character usually portrayed as arrogant, materialistic, and status-obsessed, tell this story? Because it positions him as someone who, in this moment, actually understands how to sit with death. Everyone else at Buckley's funeral is uncomfortable, awkward, or hiding behind polite rituals, but Khan leans into it. He uses an ancient tale to reframe grief not as horror, but as a moment to notice beauty. And it's especially meaningful because Buckley's death was meaningless, a random accident caused by corporate negligence. There's no moral lesson, no redemption, but through the strawberry story, Khan suggests that meaning doesn't come from how we die, but how we live in the final moments. Like much of King of the Hill, this moment blends humor with discomfort. The parable is met with silence, followed by confusion. No one really gets it, but that's kind of the point. The people in Arlen, Texas don't have a shared language for grief or coping. Hank shuts down emotionally, Peggy scrapbooking her coping methods, and Luann not even being able to find beauty in the world anymore. In contrast, Khan draws from his cultural roots to offer something spiritual and unexpected. Sure, he may be abrasive, but in this moment, he's the only character trying to give grief a shape. So, despite characters not understanding the meaning of what Khan is saying, if you look deeper into it, you can see that the show is giving you a very clear message. Grief doesn't always come with a clean resolution. Sometimes it's just about noticing the strawberry.
Well, Roger took a drink of that Gatorade, but I'll tell you something, son. It was the sweetest sip of Gatorade Roger ever tasted.
In Arlen, Texas, grief doesn't always come in big emotional declarations. It comes in quiet silences, repressed feelings, and jokes that go too far sometimes. And that right there is what makes King of the Hill so powerful. It doesn't give its characters perfect closure. Hank never fixes Bill. Luann never gets therapy, but they keep showing up. They support each other in flawed, awkward, deeply human ways. And that right there is real grief, not just crying, but carrying on. I want to thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed my deep analysis of King of the Hill, be sure to subscribe so you can get more content like this every other week. I'm actually currently going through a rewatch of King of the Hill, seeing as I haven't actually sat down to rewatch it since the final episode first premiered on Adult Swim. And actually rewatching this season, it made me want to go back and explore these moments in the show. So again, thank you very much. Like this video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, and tell me what powerful moments from this show also deal with grief. Thank you all for watching. Stay animated.